Thank you to the meeting organizers for having me here to speak to you in the middle of the night about the postdoctoral fellowship program that I have been running at Harvard Medical School for the past 6 years. So the idea of this fellowship program is much of what we've been talking about here, which is to encourage and enable research scientists to develop technical expertise. That's the emphasis, technical expertise, but also the management skills that are necessary to run a core facility. The postdocs I'll mention are, since Phil mentions, there are some postdocs that are working in a lab and in the core facility at the same time. These are postdocs who are full-time in the core facility and managed directly by me, or mentored directly by me. It's a 2-year program in principle. There's flexibility there. And the idea of the fellowship is that the fellows spend half of their time doing service work in the core facility, the day-to-day operation of the core facility, which is, of course, is an important part of the experience, but they spend the other half of their time on professional development. And that is, I think, a critical aspect of this type of fellowship program, so I'll talk about that in detail. So this is something I thought about for a while, wanting to do, and it's in part because when I started my job in 2001 at Harvard, I didn't know what I was doing. I knew a bit about microscopy, but that was about it. And so there are challenges from transitioning into research, from research into a core facility, and one of them is in a research position, graduate school or a postdoc. You're usually using maybe 1 or 2 different imaging modalities and imaging 1 or 2 different types of specimens, where when you run a core facility, you are assisting people in helping people image everything from single molecules up to embryos with all the different imaging modalities. So there's a steep learning curve when you go from a research position into a core facility. Teaching opportunities, I was fortunate to have a lot of teaching opportunities as a graduate student in Ted Salmon's lab. But those type of opportunities for graduate students and postdocs, actually, they might have the opportunity to train sort of colleagues in the lab on a microscope, but actually doing formal teaching of microscopy is quite rare and an important role for core facility staff. And then, of course, working in a core facility environment is not always what people imagine it to be. So actually having that experience before dedicating themselves to that career path is, I think, quite useful. And then core facility administration, of course. So I started the program in 2013, and you know, over the years, people have asked me, how did you wind up in this sort of position? What was your career path? And the types of people who are interested in this career path has changed quite a bit over the course of my career. To be quite honest, it used to be sort of something you could do when everything else failed. And it's turned into really talented research scientists who see the value in this type of position. So that was exciting. That's been exciting to watch over the course of my career. And as I've been doing this for quite a while, I've wanted to mentor those types of folks in a formal way. So I talked to this about this idea with the chairs of the departments that I work with, primarily at Harvard, and my steering committee made up of faculty and administrators, and they were very enthusiastic and supportive. Everybody asked me, how's it funded? There is no external funding that I'm aware of for this type of program, so it is internally funded. Since 2001, we're a Nikon Imaging Center, and we get a yearly gift from Nikon. And a few years ago, in our contract renewal, I suggested that we earmark that gift to the fellowship program. So there was no increase in my budget as a result of that, but we did earmark the gift for the fellowship program, which Nikon really liked. And so what I did was my budget didn't change very much when I started the program. I got rid of a staff position, a senior scientist staff position, and replaced that staff position with 2 fellows. So that was a little bit more expensive, and so I did have to ask for the increase in budget, but was given that. So this is, I think, a really important point, that a fellow, a postdoc, should not replace a staff position one-to-one. For multiple reasons, and I'm sure you all agree with this, but just to lay them out for you, first of all, it's just wrong. to solve a budget, applause for that, to solve your budget problems, to solve your budget problems by hiring a postdoc for what was previously a staff position and paying them, underpaying them and not giving them full benefits. So just wrong. And a lot of people come to me and say, oh, great postdocs, they're cheap. Another issue is unions. We're unionized, and certainly the unions take notice if you dissolve a staff position and replace it with a postdoc position. And if there is hope for this type of program to be funded in the future, it needs to be a training program. So I'm a planner, and I do have in place a training plan. And this has been important for multiple reasons. It's been important to communicate to others what this program is about. It's been important for the people who are applying for the fellowship to really understand, since it's somewhat novel, what they're going to be, what the experience is going to be like. And it's important for another reason that I don't remember. It'll come to me. Okay, so, oh, I know. Just to sort of have goals and to keep the fellows on track, right? To make sure that they're learning all the things that they should be learning in this environment. Okay, so this is taken from the website, so you can take a look at it in more detail. But in the first few months in the core, they learn the sort of general way that the core operates. And they do that, one-on-one with me, with others from the group. And first and foremost, they have to learn how to run all the different microscopes. So they generally come in with some level of experience, but there's always modalities that they haven't learned yet. They learn to perform routine maintenance on microscopes. And they start by just observing the trainings that the senior staff and the senior fellows, or the core staff and senior fellows are doing. So they just sit in on those trainings and watch. As far as core administration, the things that we cover, and we do this both, again, by discussing with them how we run our core. I'll mention later that one of the things they do is visit other cores in Boston. And then we also have a core director meeting of all the core directors at Harvard once a month. And we have different presentations from different types of covering the topics here. So first, record keeping. This is something I wish I had done better in the first few years. So recording, for example, equipment problems so that you can search problems that happened before. How did I solve that? So methods for doing that effectively. Any purchases that are happening in the course of the fellowship, the fellow sits down and does that with me side by side. So they learn how to make the decisions about what needs to be purchased, how to communicate with the faculty on that. And just the whole process of getting that equipment in and installed. Environmental health and safety. This is something I had to teach myself, and I had to teach Harvard, that this is something that has to be thought about differently in a core facility environment. And NIH Service Center financial regulations. So in the US, that is something that all core facilities have to abide by. So as I said, technical skills for me is really the most critical part of this. And the fellows learn their technical skills in multiple ways. Of course, working with users is an important part of that. But I also run a course at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, a 2-week course on quantitative imaging. And the fellows come to that course, as teaching assistants. And while they are teaching assistants, they attend all of the lectures and participate in all of the labs. So it is very much a learning experience as well as sort of helping out. Okay, so in the second half of their first year, they delve a bit deeper into the technical aspects. So I encourage them to spend time really studying, reading the literature and studying different techniques. When they come across or begin working with a user that is doing a technique they have never performed before, I encourage them to, again, read the literature. And as they are learning these new techniques, I ask them to present in our weekly group meeting what they have learned, and we discuss it as a group. And teaching skills. I think it is critically important for core facility directors to teach at their institutions. There's a huge need for microscopy education for research scientists. And again, the way that that generally starts is presenting just to my group. In the second year, we encourage the fellows to really work on refining their technical skills and teaching skills. And so independently troubleshooting and repairing microscopes is something I think is quite important for core facility staff to be able to do. We really accelerate problems being fixed when we can tell the local vendors what is wrong and what's going on. Takes a little while before they trust us in that, but they eventually do. I don't blame them. You know, as the fellows learn more, instead of just sort of shadowing us in helping users with experimental design, the roles switch and they become the person working directly with the user and helping to advise them at that level. And then finally, when they're ready, they teach independently. So I have over the years taught a lot at Harvard Medical School, and there is, as I said, a huge need for education, certainly in my institution. And so we offer workshops and lectures, and basically any topic a fellow is interested in learning and developing a lecture on, we offer. And finally, all of the fellows are encouraged to develop an independent project. And I talk with them about, you know, what their interests are, and we try to come up with something. I have no funding for this, so it can't be anything they want, but it is their choice. It is them following something that they are particularly interested in. So to give you specific examples, Tally Lambert, who was the first fellow, he was there for the installation of our structural illumination microscope. And he quickly identified that it was very difficult for users to choose the best optical transfer function to get the best reconstruction. And so he was also interested in learning how to code. So he taught himself Python, and he wrote software that we still use to this day, which pulls optical transfer functions out of a file, runs a reconstruction on each one, uses SimCheck to identify the best image. So it's really helped us accelerate the training of users and to ensure that they get the best image quality. And it didn't cost any money for him to do it. Anna is super interested in teaching, and so she developed lots of new lectures and workshops. And Michael Weber was interested in building a spin microscope for teaching purposes. And in this case, I did have some funding for my Cultivating Harvard course to buy the sort of parts and pieces that we didn't have laying around for him to build that microscope, and we do use it for workshops, as well as Cultivating Harvard. And over the course of the fellowship, I want them to get to know the imaging community, and that includes not just other core facility directors, but also imaging research scientists, so those in the microscopy field. I think it's really important for us to embed ourselves, you know, not just in this environment, but also in the microscopy development field, for example, to know those scientists. And so the way to do that is the same way that research scientists get to know their field, attending scientific meetings. So in proposing this fellowship program, I also asked for funding for the fellows to be able to attend meetings. And I mentioned earlier that we have many core facilities in the Boston area, so they do field trips and spend the day at MIT, at the Cambridge campus at Harvard, seeing how these other core facilities run. And they are, like a traditional postdoc, encouraged to spend time on interviews, developing their CV and such. And as someone said, the language in research is publications, and I agree with that. I think that it's important for, when establishing oneself in the imaging field, to not just publish, you know, sort of middle authorship on other people's papers, but to establish and express your technical expertise in publication. So I encourage the fellows to write up something that they're interested in. And you see some examples here. And you know, that's a great learning experience for them and gets their name out there. And finally, grant writing. We all need to know how to write a shared equipment grant, and so I write one every round now with a fellow so that they can get that experience. Networking through the Cold Spring Harbor course and going to meetings with fellow. I try to, as I mentioned, introduce them to folks in the imaging community, and this is us going to Chroma to see how they make filters, so networking and getting to know folks in the companies is equally important as well, of course, in our role. So where are they now? So Tally, I hired. He's been promoted a couple of times. He's now the Associate Director of Imaging Technology. He was finishing up his fellowship about the same time as we decided to purchase a lattice light sheet, which if anyone has one knows that it needs a Tally Lambert to run it. So I was very fortunate that he wanted to stick around. And then I did it again. I just hired Anna. I was told by the administration, you can't hire all the fellows, and I took that as a challenge. No, again, this was never the plan, but I received funding last year from CZI, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and the money that freed up in my budget, I used to hire Anna as our Associate Director of Imaging Education. Michael went on to work for Involve 3D, which is a program that is building a mobile core facility, if you will. So they're going to take a novel spin microscope and bring it to folks' lab. I think they're just getting up and running on that. George Campbell is currently interviewing for positions, just starting to interview for positions, and Riley Walsh just started. So, yeah. Leave it at that. Okay, so a bit more about establishing a core program if you're interested. So I do think, as I've said, a training plan, really understanding what you're going to be able to offer these fellows and communicating that well is important. Demonstrated commitment from the institution, and this is not just for the fellowship program, but this is for the core director who is going to be mentoring that fellow. And I do think that the core director has to have a fair amount of experience and be able to serve as a mentor. All right, demonstrated commitment by the institution, what does that mean? That means that the core director is encouraged to pursue scholarly endeavors. So all the things that I said that we train the fellows in, the core facility director has to have been able to do that in the course of their career at the institution. I think it's important that the director make decisions for their core. So simply because that's a good role model for the sort of next generation of core facility directors. And I want my fellows to go into roles where they expect to be viewed as the expert and that their voice matters in the decisions that are made for their core. Faculty appointments, as we've said, for core directors, I think that an institution that is at that point where they're willing to offer a faculty track of some sort is important, and secure funding. I don't think it is that these fellow positions should have to rely on hourly fees. There needs to be secure funding for the course of the commitment. And experienced core directors. So I had quite a few pretty junior core facility directors ask me about this fellowship program. So a couple of points on that. You do need to be able to offer broad expertise and core facility experience. That is the purpose of these fellowships. Opportunities. So a core facility director that is already established in the community is going to be able to offer that to the fellows as well. I had to give up a lot of the fun stuff. So when a more junior core facility person asked me about this, I asked them, what is your favorite part of the job? And would you be willing to give that up and let a fellow do it for you? And watch them not do it as well, or maybe even worse, watch them do it a lot better. So, I used to give, 25 plus lectures a year at Harvard, and now I give 2 or 3. When I can't do them. So, that's a challenge, but it's also really rewarding if you're ready to do that. And I want to warn people about the idea of co-mentoring. So having a core facility director and a faculty member who has never run a core facility, doesn't really understand what we do, serve as a co-mentor to sort of get around maybe the core facility director not having a faculty position. I don't think that's a model that will benefit the fellows. So I have been working with the administration at Harvard Medical School because other core facilities of all different types have shown interest in having fellows. I've been working with the deans and the director of office for postdoctoral fellows to develop policies for Harvard Medical School. They're not quite in place yet, but they're getting close. And the idea is that new core fellow programs, so if a core facility wants to have a fellows program, it has to be approved by an oversight committee, an internal oversight committee, which means they have to have a training plan, et cetera, funding, and that program will be periodically reviewed. And then finally, if I can take a couple more minutes, I want to tell you about a couple of educational initiatives. So I'm very interested in open education, in supplying the research community with resources for education. And so microcourses, microlist, and microforum, I'll tell you about quickly. Microcourses is my YouTube channel where I make short videos. There's an excellent online course from iBiology. These are short, they're 15 minutes or less on a very specific topic that people can watch at their lab bench while the timer's going. And they've been quite well received, and I have a lot of fun making them. Microlist is a searchable database where you can post jobs, courses, meetings, tools, software, etc. And Microforum we launched most recently, which is a forum for discussion. So I think we probably all know about the confocal listserv. It's been around for a long time. This is a more modern platform. It's built on the same platform, it's called Discourse, that the very well established image analysis forum, and we have them linked together and such. So it's gotten off really well. We have a lot of good discussions going on there, so I encourage you to take a look. And finally, I can take no credit for this, but Tally Lambert from my group built FPBase, which is the fluorescent protein database. And there are other sort of databases of fluorophores out there, but this one he has over 700 fluorescent proteins and probes in the database. It's the only one that's community editable, so you can upload your protein or a protein that you use into the database. You can create and share a collection. We already have people who are referencing their microscope on the database and the probes that they've used in materials and methods. Sorry, I said reference your microscope before I told you that one of the really useful things I think for core facilities in general in this tool is you can build a custom spectra viewer and embed that in your website. So you can put in all of the all the hardware in your microscope and allow your users to access all of the spectra in the database, and it gives you an overlay of the spectra in your filters and an efficiency calculation for how well that fluorophore will work with your system. So thank you for letting me plug our educational resources, and finally I'll thank the fellows and Chancellor Zuckerberg Initiative for funding.
Fantastic, thank you very much. I'm sure lots of people want to attend and be a fellow. One question perhaps before we go to the next session. Jason?
Jennifer, looking like you're having one fellow at a time, is that correct?
There's been two at a time.
Okay.
So
how many could you do? And keep your day job and all that stuff? Or how many would you want to do?
I mean, I do, spend a fair amount of time working with them. Now that I have Anna and Tally, who I fully trust, to mentor the fellows alongside with me. I am actually waiting for funding for the school for a third. I think I could probably go to 4. I mean, it's really, of course, it's beneficial for the fellows to have other fellows, right? We have journal club, we have group meeting, and so having more like-minded folks who are learning to interact with is beneficial for them. So I would feel, I wouldn't, I would want to do it incrementally to make sure, but yeah.
You could do like a reasonable of 3 to 4. And
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you very much. So join me in thanking Jennifer.